All right, gentlemen, here we go, and we are off with the first pick in the draft, 1-1. We're going to be looking at the Frøstrup Frogs. And I will say this much, he went 3-10 last year, and that mark should be vastly improved upon. His team really is pretty dang solid at every position. I don't know if he's made some deals this offseason or what, but he's got a great roster here. Starting off with the starting quarterback Max Stafford, who is a solid QB. I think last year was really the worst year we're ever going to see for him, and I think that he's going to only improve his touchdown numbers, and especially once they get some more, get Broyles back healthy. They drafted a receiver. His name is totally escaping me right now. It's not Marcus Davis. It's somebody else. But they picked up a good wideout in the draft. I think Stafford will improve. He also has Cutler and Flynn. I think they're both depth guys at this point. I don't like Cutler. We know what he is. He's going to throw a lot of picks, but he's going to throw a lot of touchdowns to Brandon Marshall. He's nothing more than a QB2 at this point, but he is good depth. He's good insurance. If you have to start him, you're not feeling bad about yourself. I'd say he has a solid A-, B+ at his quarterback position for 2013 anyway. Moving on to wide receiver. No. I'm sorry. Moving on to running back. The Frogs fields David Wilson, Ryan Matthews, Mark Ingram, and he's also got Vereen and Mike Goodson. I will say, starting at the top with Wilson, Matthews, those are probably your every week starters. Matthews he's an injury waiting to happen. So actually, you know what? It's starting to show why he picked low and is going to have the 1-1 this year. Ryan Matthews was dinged up. He was very, very inconsistent last year. But there is a new coaching staff. I wouldn't say there's reason for optimism, but there's reason to not be pessimistic, if that makes any sense. It's a fresh start for Matthews, and I really hope that he can get it together because he's got all the talent in the world. He's a guy I liked as a buy low this offseason because I saw him going for as cheap as, the 10th pick in the draft or something like that. And that's crazy for somebody with all the upside and the opportunity that he's going to have. He also has David Wilson, who has been one of the hottest commodities all offseason long. I've seen him in trades for LaShawn McCoy, Wilson and a second-round pick for Shady McCoy. That's how high some people are valuing him. In most people's eyes, he's a top 10 back already. And he's done very little, so I'd slow my roll a little bit on that, but I think he's got top-tier running back ability, and they did not draft anyone in New York. They're counting on him to be the guy. I'm not a big believer in Andre Brown, so I think he's in great shape at running back 1 and 2. At 3, he's got Ingram, who he's another guy that I'd like to buy this offseason. I've been touting as a buy low. I like Ingram's potential in that offense. If you remember, Sean Payton was out last year. If you remember, he actually had, Mark Ingram had a pretty good end of the 2012 season. If you remember, Chris Ivory is no longer in town. If you remember, Sean Payton really tried to involve Mark Ingram in his rookie year. All those things put together, I think, mean that Ingram is going to have a pretty solid year this year. I think he's, nothing is given to him, and there's still a lot of mouths to feed there. But Pierre Thomas is not getting any younger. Chris Ivory is gone. Travaris Cadet is more of a threat to Sproles' catches than anything. And Sproles is just a catch guy. He's not ever going to have more than, say, 90 carries. So with all those things put into consideration, I think Ingram has a pretty good chance to get 200 to 250 carries this year. And if he gets that, I think there's a good chance he goes off for 1,000, maybe 1,100 yards and 8 or 10 touchdowns, which isn't stud production, but it's certainly better. It would certainly increase his value and make a great RB3 flex play kind of guy. Vereen is a guy that could produce this year. He had a great playoff game. I can't remember how many catches it was, but I know it was quite a bit. I want to say a good 100 and something yards receiving. He was in good shape. He also has Goodson, and Goodson's value took a bit of a hit. I know he was a hot waiver wire pickup early in the offseason in free agency, but now that the Jets have Ivory, it's looking like he's going to be their guy going forward. Looking on down the list at wide receiver, he is in great shape at wideout with Fitzgerald, Cobb, and Julio. And Demarius. I should mention that as well. Fitz, Cobb, Julio, and Demarius is absolutely ridiculous. All 4 of those guys are wide receiver 1s on most teams, and to have 4 of them, that should win him a ton of games on its own. Fitzgerald had a down year last year. I still consider him the best of the bunch. Randall Cobb and Julio Jones both were phenomenal last year. They should only improve on that. That 2011 draft was great for a few wide receivers anyway. There were a lot of busts in that draft. Other than AJ and Julio and Cobb, there were a lot of people that busted out. But he has two of those three studs right there. Demaryius Thomas is an absolute beast. With Peyton Manning at the helm, there's no reason to believe he's not going to be top 10 for the next at least 3 years, give or take. So those four receivers are going to win him games on their own. They can get you 100 points, just those four players. 4 of his 10 starters or whatever it is could get him 100 points. That alone can win you some games. He's got a good wide receiver 5 in Tampa, Mike Williams, who had a resurgent year last year, and there's no reason to think that he can't do it again, with Freeman a year older, a year smarter, and Mike Williams is a year older and a year smarter. He improved on his 2011 numbers last year, and I think that's probably about where he'll settle, 70 catches for 900 yards and 6 to 8 touchdowns, but that's fine. That's something to be valued in fantasy that some people don't realize. A guy like that, or a guy like a couple years ago, Devon Best was just saying, I'll get you 80 catches for 800 yards. He did that like 3 years in a row. That's great. I would love to be able to plug him in during my bye weeks and feel good about getting 14 to 15 points out of him. That's definitely worth something. He may not have the upside, but he's got the ability to win you some games, or at least not lose you some games. Mohamed Sanu is his last receiver worth mentioning, and I expect him to come back strong this year. They didn't really draft a high-profile receiver. They got Kobe Hamilton late, but I don't think he's a threat to Sanu. I think Sanu is the wide receiver 2 there. And granted, they have all that tight end, power now, so Sanu may not actually be that relevant as the fourth mouth to feed on that team, but I think that he'll have a productive year, and in year 3 is really when I expect year 3 breakout from Sanu. And it's not year 3, it's year 2, but I think we could be looking at, 50 catches for 720 yards, and then next year a big explosion out of him. At tight end, he's got Aaron Hernandez and F. Dave, as I call him, Fred Davis, and Rob Hausler. So 3 startable tight ends there. Hernandez is a monster when healthy. Welker is out, which means there are more middle routes for Hernandez, and that's what he thrives on. He could have set career highs in receptions for sure this year. As for Fred Davis, he's coming back, although they drafted a tight end, and Hausler is looking like he's going to be the guy in Arizona. And Carson Palmer can wing it. If you remember what he made Brandon Myers look like last year, if he can do any of that for Rob Hausler, then Hausler is going to have a great year, because he is infinitely more talented than Brandon Myers. I feel like Brandon Myers works at like Radio Shack or something. He's just a guy. He's just a person. You've met him at the grocery store. You just don't realize it. In terms of picks, the Frøstrup Frogs is in amazing shape. With that team, he's going to be able to walk away with a 1-1, 1-9, and the 1-10. At 1-1, I would think I would have to go running back because his receivers are so loaded. I would probably, I hate to name drop here, but I'm going to be doing it all draft. I'd have to go Giovanni Bernard if I had the top pick in the draft. My only other considerations would be Ed Lacy or Tavon Austin, and I think ultimately I would settle on Giovanni Bernard because I have a need at running back, and he fits the draft slot. A lot of places Bernard's going 1-1, so it's not like he's being overdrafted. You're not drafting based on need if the need happens to match your board. And on my board, Giovanni Bernard is the number 1 prospect, and that's who I would take. At 1-9, I'd grab another running back if I could. I would consider Lattimore there. I would consider Zach Stacy. I would think about Jonathan Franklin if he's available, which he would be. I mean, at 1-10, I would probably go best player available, and that's fine if that's a wide receiver. Maybe Justin Hunter is still around. Maybe Keenan Allen is still around. There's no reason not to get another receiver because you can always trade assets for what you need. So I would go BPA at 110. Good luck, Frøstrup Frogs, with your picks. In terms of your playoff implications, I think that this is a playoff team with the picks. Right now, if I'm looking at it, I say he's probably a 6 seed. But once he gets those guys, Bernard in there or Lacy, whoever he drafts, and another running back there for depth, this team has a great upside. Mostly young players. Really, the only old guy that you would consider old on his team is Larry Fitzgerald. But he's a very productive old guy. And I believe that this is going to be a top team next year, probably a 3 seed. I don't think he's a favorite, but he's certainly a championship contender. So good luck to you, Frogs.